Thanks for watching. Please like and subscribe to help us spread TIPA's positive approach message around the world.
Well, hey, everybody, and it's good to have so many friends of ours in the Zoom room. So some of the folks in the Zoom room are friends that have come for other questions, and some might be here for tonight. We aren't sure. We have Rachel, who handles all the incoming questions. We have Cheryl, who is one of our consultants. Beth is another consultant. Both of them are also mentors. Now, Matthew is going to be out at YouTube monitoring for questions out in the community to see what people have to say out there. Last week, we celebrated Frontal Temporal Disorders or Dementia Week, and it was increasing awareness about a type of dementia known as FTD, or it might be primary progressive aphasia. It could be semantic or non-fluent, fluent, or it could be agrammatic or locopenic. Those sound all fancy. Or it could be behavioral variant of a frontal temporal dementia. Some people might know the older version of having a combo called PIC's disease. And then last week, we discovered there's this whole new categorization where they've moved many things that used to be somewhere else over into a motor version of an FTD. So they are putting progressive supranuclear palsy over there, and FTD plus ALS into this category, and corticobasal palsy or dementia in this category now. So over the past 2 or 3 years, there keep being more changes, and that's why we always try to keep up with some of the latest. And FTD is the most common form of young onset dementia. It can happen quite young, but the average age is 40 to 60 years of life. That's the average grouping. And it can happen to people who are older. And it turns out there's often involvement of tau pathology. And there's also another protein that's becoming more and more talked about, and it's the TDP43. It's a protein malformation. And for those of you who are familiar with the stuff that we do, I'm going to see whether any of the team remember when I first mentioned TDP43. See if anybody can bring back a memory. Oh, I knew it would be old Beth over there. There we go, Beth. Let's see what you got.
Sure. I'm going to guess. Is it late?
There you go. Latent, autosomal, TDP43 encephalopathy. Now, it's a newer dementia that they just really identified in England a few years ago. And that one, now interesting, that particular late variation only happens for people typically after the age of 80. So if you had no symptoms prior to 80 and you started showing symptoms at about age 80, 85, it is much more likely that you have this late variation, this variation on it, this TDP43 abnormality, than that you have any other health condition, any other dementia. So that's a different one. And it has a combo of symptoms that combine FTD plus Alzheimer's. So it's an interesting sort of progression pattern, but no symptoms till 80 plus, and then sudden sort of starting symptoms in a combo of frontal lobe, language loss, and Alzheimer's, which would be the immediate recall problems, short-term memory problems, kind of combo.
You know, and TIPA, interestingly enough about late, if you get interested in this, if you're curious about it, and if you're here and you dig deeper, because you need to, want to, would like to know, late is described early on, when they first started coming out with it, very much as just like Alzheimer's. Yeah. And I think there might have been, in the defense of the people writing, it was trying to help the public link it to what is for many people, the only known type and form of cause of dementia, which is Alzheimer's specific type. So be aware if you're at this level of awareness, which is different from the majority of the world. If you're here listening, you might be the smartest one in the room. Just saying. Check out
including perhaps medical providers who are not keeping up with this because they haven't really been keeping track of dementia because there's still no cure. or we've got this one trial, people are trying out this thing. However, they are not keeping up with the findings of the scientists who are getting real curious about this TDP-43. And there are even some folks who are proposing that maybe it, rather than some of the others, might have a causative effect, because they're also finding it in some of the other frontal lobe issues, and in some of the other kinds of conditions. It turns out there's somewhere around 20 some of these markers that they can locate. And so it may turn out to be more important in more cases, but they had never looked for it before. Now that they're starting to look for it, more people are finding it. Oh, wait, there it is. But it's one of those things that we didn't know about until very recently. So it's changing some of the dynamics, but FTD. So there you go. I just wanted to highlight that we did spend some time last week trying to highlight those. If anybody has questions on frontal temporal, this is the type of dementia that Bruce Willis ended up having started with just the language component. So just having language loss, and then actually starting to show the progression into the other parts of the brain, which happens for about 75% of everybody who has a progressive aphasia. Some people will only have progressive aphasia and it stops there. It dead ends right there at the aphasia. It only affects the temporal lobe. And then other folks will have it spread throughout their brain in developing that dementia that's associated with it. So, all right, here we are. I'm here. I've done my little spiel about the thing that I wanted to make sure I talked about. And if you didn't see the interview Emma and I did together, that was on Instagram I think that was on Monday or Tuesday, Monday last week, I think she put it out, talking about supporting families. And we also then talked about supporting individuals. And then last week we had Ann Farguson, who is a person who's living with FTD. And she came on at Time with TIPA in the morning and also shared about the resource she helped develop, which is a toolkit of resources for people with FTD, helping a younger group of people navigate some of the internet to try to find what they need, which is often help with insurance, help with jobs, help with having problems with family, because often smaller, younger children are involved in these cases, dealing with Social Security, Medicare, early retirement, dealing with issues of problems with legal issues, difficulty if you have behavioral variant, doing things you shouldn't do in places you shouldn't do them with people who have authority, and so you end up in legal challenges. So there's some resource information out there, particularly for people who are living and dealing with that form of dementia. And it's under identified. It usually takes 2 to 5 years to notice that that is what it is. And some people go for years and years with misidentification of a midlife crisis, or living with a lot of stress, or not trying, or I've actually been involved with a police officer that when we figured out what was going on, he had been fired for drinking and womanizing and doing things. And it turned out that he had been injured in a car chase like about 12 years earlier, had a head injury, had been evaluated as not having any major trauma, but then started experiencing some of these symptoms. So after working through this, his partner came to a workshop I did, and it was a training workshop for police officers. And he said, "You're describing my partner who got fired. Tell me more about this." And we did the work, and it ended up, he was then reinstated so that he could qualify for insurance and care, and he was given disability because the injury that he received with a car chase, where he was injured in a car chase, actually was the initiating incident by all indicators. And when they did do more intensive work looking at what had happened and what was in the brain records, indeed, he had suffered a trauma. That was the initial incident, and it had just not resulted in a coma. And he had a concussion, but no one picked up on it as being significant because they didn't do any cognitive testing at the time. He went right back to work. So anyway, that's sort of a good story in that we were able to follow up and get him the resources he should have had in the first place and get his name reinstated as an honorable release from service as opposed to being dismissed for poor behavior. Because FTD, frontal variant, behavioral variant, makes it really challenging to behave yourself in many cases. Not because you don't want to, but because that's the problem that you're having in your brain. So, Rachel, what we got on the docket tonight? Anything coming up?
We do.
Cool.
So our friend Alyssa is here. And as we know, Alyssa makes a difference for a lot of folks that she works with. And so she came with a question. She has someone who's in a Ruby state. She's pretty much Ruby. And there's frequent screaming in the memory care unit, which not surprisingly is pretty disruptive to other residents and is triggering behaviors from them. So that's kind of a general idea, and then Alyssa can give us more details.
Okay, so I hang on, Alyssa. So you used the word screams. Is that sort of what you're talking about?
Yeah, it's more like that, and really, I can't even imitate it because it's so high pitched. I can't even get that high.
Ooh, ouch. So that says it's a really short vocal cord. It's a really tight vocal cord. I'm really curious, what does her face and her neck and her body look like when she does this?
So real quick, so this might be helpful too. So back in end of August, so before this, she was actually more like an emerald. She was walking. She's bilingual, but she later on has, more recently been more Spanish speaking. I didn't see her when she was an emerald, but I know who she is. And she had a fall. She hit the front right of her head. And since she's come back, it's been a total decline, like wheelchair bound now, lots of screaming. There's some instances which have reduced where she will scream like mama or abuela. So at first I thought it was that like confusion with the change and wanting that security, and kind of noticed they finally put me into work with her. And when I noticed when it was 1-to-1, it would definitely reduce. However, sometimes it is still occurring. It still occurred when I was there for a little bit and I brought her outside. But the problem is when I'm not there and family is not there, it is so frequent. And sometimes it won't even be the mama or abuela, it's just screaming, where other residents are trying to pour water on her, wanting to fight, and they're trying to leave. They did do there was nothing broken, by the way. They did she has vascular dementia. She was diagnosed with vascular dementia. I didn't get a copy. I can't find the copy of the hospital paperwork. The MRI was just, there was nothing abnormal. There was no acute or anything like that. No fractures, nothing. Family's been a little bit challenging with medication, so that they don't really want a lot of medicine. So, I thought maybe some of it was pain. So they did start doing like a Tylenol, but it didn't really seem to work. I've also thought I had them tracking bowel movements, because sometimes she'll kind of shake in the chair where it looks almost like discomfort. And then that was definitely a trigger where they noticed more screaming when she didn't have one. So I had staff, start tracking. However, memory care unit, sometimes not as consistent, but my thought process was, if we can catch it before it happens, then maybe we can give like a laxative or the prune juice or something ahead of time. But it seems like even with that, it's still constantly going. And of course, I work with a lot of other residents in the memory care unit. So I hear their family members, and it's creating a lot of difficulties because it's adversely impacting the other residents, and their families are really annoyed. And then this family, doesn't want the medication, which I understand too. So it's been very challenging, and they can't really afford a private caregiver either to provide that 1-to-1. So I was hoping maybe you'd have some suggestions.
Okay. All right. So I am going to have folks sort of I'm going to have Cheryl kick us off here with Cheryl. Thinking about this situation, are there additional questions you have for Alyssa, or is there something you want to sort of consider or have us think about?
Well, Alyssa, the one question I did want to ask is she doing this when she's up is she in a jerry chair, wheelchair, or is this happening in bed as well, or?
Yeah, so kind of across settings, if they're giving her a shower and she's in the shower chair, it's happening. If she's now in a wheelchair, if she's in the wheelchair, if she's sitting on the couch, if she's in her room, the family doesn't want her in the room often. So most of the time she's out in the wheelchair. Sometimes they'll put her in a regular like chair, but for the most part, because of the frequent screaming, she's not really sitting on the couch or those recliner chairs where it's around everybody.
And have they mentioned anything about any skin breakdown, ulcers, or like any sort of on her bottom?
Yeah, she sees nursing, and they haven't reported any like pressure ulcers or anything like that. They are frequently trying to get her up and adjust her and turn her. So she's, I guess, even though she is sitting a lot, they said there was nothing. And I actually asked the nurse that the other day too. I thought maybe that was a pain I couldn't really see.
Alyssa, did you say that when she was in the bed and lying in the bed, she also does this?
Yes. Yes. She usually lays on her back. That's what staff says. I don't usually see her at at night. I usually see her more during the day, and she's already up by that time. But they did say she will shout. She is taking. It might be Seroquel at night, but it's a very low dose. So she's been sleeping a bit better during the night, because that was a big issue as well, was the nighttime screaming. So that has seemed to help. But they did cut the dose because the family didn't like that in the morning she was still kind of zombie. Yeah.
Okay. So Cheryl, do you have anything else in your request bucket here?
Well, I'm just kind of, how does she spend her day?
So it's a combination. She will eat meals like with everyone. There is, because she is now really more Spanish speaking, there is usually at least usually they have 3 or 4 people back in the memory care unit. I would say 9 times out of 10, there's 2 people there who are bilingual, and one more Spanish speaking than English. So, I've tried to tell them, like, the one person who speaks Spanish, when you can, have her kind of paired with her, taking her outside, kind of engaging her. There is another lady who does tend to be she's more of like a diamond emerald and likes to take care of people. So I try to have her helping, but it seems like even when she's just kind of there with her, she's still having the screaming. So it's kind of a combination. There's really not many activities going on. She will do sometimes some of the music, but staff says when they try to do like the group activity, whether it's like hitting the volleyball or having music or coloring or anything like that, she's screaming or she's not doing anything.
And what about a weighted blanket or something that will offer her more comfort?
Yeah, so they have, I don't think it's a weighted blanket, but it's one of those, I guess it's considered like a fidget blanket. Yeah, she has that. And I mean, I never really, like, even if I try to like kind of engage with it first, she doesn't really imitate it, or, doesn't really seem really too, interested in it. She likes like salsa music. I'll sometimes try to play like music with her, and I bring her outside a lot. Combination just so she can get some sunlight, and then so she's kind of the residents kind of get a break. And that does help. It's just that unfortunately, when I'm only seeing her once a week, and sometimes carryover is poor, and this has been going on now for, since she got back from the hospital, probably like the beginning of September. Staff's getting a little worn out, and the residents. So it's been kind of a real big challenge.
So let me make sure, Alyssa, I'm hearing you right. When she's outside with you, it's often a lot quieter for her out there.
Mhm.
And she's a lot quieter.
Correct.
Okay, and when you're out there, are there still screeching? I'm going to use the word screeching incidents.
When I've been with her, no.
No.
Another caregiver said yes, but when I've been out south, I've never had that. And a lot of times,
Never had that happen.
I don't get it. Nope.
Okay. What from her past? Tell me a little bit about where she's from and what her background is. Do you have any of that information at all?
Yeah, so very vague. I believe she's originally from Puerto Rico, and then she lived in New York. She has two daughters. Both live pretty local, and they will come and see her. They kind of said the same thing as me, and I think that's part of it. Sometimes when they're with her, the screaming is reduced. Sometimes it seems like she'll scream when if the daughter's talking to somebody else, she's like, it almost seems sometimes like she's almost screaming for attention. It almost seems like in that sense, because if the daughter's not giving her attention, it's the immediate screaming. Once the daughter's with her, she's that. And I think what's interesting too is she was living with her husband. Her husband passed away, I think they said like 6 or 7 years ago.
Okay.
I think it was more, actually, I think it might have been 5 or 6 years ago. And the daughters said that the husband kind of did everything because she was starting to have trouble. So I think some of it is like that security and I don't know what's going on and I can't figure things out. I need my brain with me type of thing. But I just don't know sometimes how to meet those needs in the context that we're in when family can't really do or doesn't really want to do, the private caregiver or, the medicine. I do try to space it out. Like if I know they'll be there on Monday, I try to be there on Wednesday, so at least it's spread out, but it's been challenging because a lot of people
before this fall and the head injury and this rapid sort of shift, she didn't have any screaming episodes at all. She was easy to get along with. She did okay with care.
Yeah, she liked to be more alone. Like she's always been more isolated. She didn't always love activity. She liked some of the music, but for the most part, she never had any of the screaming or anything.
Okay, so this is
she would wander around more. Yeah, she would wander around
and
more.
Mobile. So she would spend time moving around on her own, and now she's not wheelchair mobile, I'm thinking.
Yeah, correct.
Okay, so she's stuck in a chair, not able to get up. Is she got any kind of special seating in the wheelchair, or is it just a standard wheelchair with a sag bottom?
She has like a special cushion on the chair.
A special cushion. How about the back of the chair? Does the back of the chair have any special reinforcement?
They've done both. At times she's had a pillow, and at times she has nothing. Or she usually has like a blanket around her too, so the blanket is kind of like tucked behind her. So I guess you could say sometimes she has like the back of the blanket, kind of wrapping around her, sort of.
Okay. All right. So we have some data here, and I'm going to throw up the 6 pieces of the puzzle for everybody just to have folks just take a quick peek and see what we don't have data on that we might want to. And I'll ask, since Beth hasn't said anything for a while, Beth, do you want to take us through the 6 pieces of the puzzle here and see what we've got so far?
Yeah, so help me out, guys. And feel free to unmute and speak up. Say, ooh, and I'll hear you. So we've got, I feel like a vague notion of vascular dementia, but there was also some acute event. So I'm going from the green and making a quick bounce over to a health and wellness and fitness sort of place. So when I think about brain health, I feel like we're missing a little bit of the story, which brings us again to then thinking back about the person. So just recapping, we know that we're talking about a person who is bilingual, that primarily at this point is primarily Spanish speaking, that is someone that is interested in the past being more alone, but yet when she goes to just her room, clearly needs are not being met. So this is a person that before they could meet their own needs when they were more alone. Is that accurate, folks, in terms of the person? Is that accurate, Alyssa?
Before she was still getting some assistance with like toileting and with showering, of course, but she was able to, feed herself. That's another part. She's not really eating and drinking as much. She's kind of very like hands kind of close to her. I've tried to some days are better than others, like with hand under hand. When I was there on Monday, I tried to do like some hand under hand, but she was kind of stiff and it was really hard like to kind of get her going. Once I got her going, it was better, but it was kind of hard initially to kind of get that. Usually I don't have that problem, but she's not eating and drinking as much. Chewing is very, very munching pattern and like very little acceptance of it. Apparently she doesn't eat for anybody, but she'll eat for me.
So what I'm hearing is a bunch of things, and I'm hoping my therapy.
Total change.
So big change. We go from looking at the movement, we go from what she said to munch. So really, if you take your jaws and go open and close, not very skillful. Versus when we actually chew, we will actually bite down on the food, grind one way, come up, and our tongues and lips will actually pull and take that and make it into a place that takes all that chewed food and puts it back on the surface of our tooth. We clamp down again, and then we grind the other way. Didn't know you were so skilled. You do this even without thinking. So that tells me a pretty significant change pretty rapidly. So we went from someone who had a lot of skill to, over the course of an acute instance with a fall, it sounds like. And Teepa also brought in the right frontal temporal lobe damage recently. So that's the acute place where this happened.
I was curious too if I know it doesn't usually show up on, imaging, but if there is like, concussion or like a mild traumatic brain injury, which is causing that damage to the frontal lobe, which is resulting in the reduced impulse control and behavior changes, which is also being added into vascular dementia, which I don't know how to fully address it, but it seems like that's occurring as well as part of the brain changes.
So that's really resonating with a couple of people and watching their eyes go, and Teepa's nodding. So going back to this person who did manage the high stimuli world, lots of noises and things. And so I would go to my room. Now all I know is that I don't like it, and it's loud, and more touching and more interaction is not, it's just, I'm not able to manage that if I'm having impulse control. Think about how it is, how many times when people ask you, if you have a mild headache, it's because you haven't maybe gotten your coffee in time in the morning, or you haven't gotten enough hydration, or you haven't gotten a good night's sleep. Someone's asked you casually, how you doing? You're going to say fine. So that is the frontal lobe going, whoa, I just need to get some Tylenol or ibuprofen, or maybe get some hydration, and really being able to think through in a very skillful way to manage. And yet, how do we manage our own stimuli now with the other senses, noise, the sensations on our body? So now I'm starting to go down to here, to the environmental support specifically. So what are the things that we've heard so far that have been covered? I'm going to start with our S's, our 4 S's, just to think about this in a very concrete way. Tell me first about what we know that we've heard about surfaces for her. We've got a cushion with a traditional wheelchair. So knowing the wheelchair has got a scoop to it and a scoop back, they're foldable. That is one sensation that she's dealing with. And is she able to functionally move? If we're talking about somebody who chomps this way and has lost a whole other language set, how skillful do we think she is in her body to be able to assess where the pain and discomfort is, and to be able to adjust her body in a frequency at the level in which you all adjust? So help me out here, PTOT folks. How often do we, without even thinking, adjust and switch from our right butt cheek pressure to our left butt cheek pressure? How long do we do that, guys? How long do we?
These, okay, guys, it's 30 seconds or less because you start to get necrosis if you stay in one position longer than 30 seconds.
And that's
So you do micro adjustments at least every 30 seconds. That's how you keep your capillaries flowing. You can do just little ones, but you got to do something. And if you don't, you'll cut off the blood flow.
I'm thinking more and more sensory, but at the same time, it's not just that, it's noise, it's activity, it's so forth, but I could be wrong. Jeffrey, what's coming to mind?
I'm sorry, you're asking for me. Okay, sorry. I was just going to ask Alyssa, can you hear me? Yes, this woman's from Puerto Rico. You said she likes salsa. It's just sort of interesting because I'm all about anecdotes, and my wife has vascular dementia. I live in Colombia, and we have the opposite because she is regressing, so she's lost her Spanish and is reverting to English. So it doesn't surprise me that with vascular dementia, your person is regressing, losing your English and regressing to Spanish. It is what it is, and that's going to have to be dealt with. But I was questioning, why did the family not want to continue with the Tylenol? Do you know? Because I thought that people with dementia cannot express pain.
So they are continuing the Tylenol. The Tylenol they are allowing. It's the there was another pain meds and they cut the Seroquel. It might have been a Xanax she was getting, and then they cut the Seroquel because they didn't like when they came in the morning a couple of times. They felt that she was too, zonked. And I know it's been hard for the daughters too, because she's young. She's 60, which is still relatively young. So they didn't want that quality of life. That
is the home willing to play her favorite salsa music when she gets like this, and see if she's willing to even get up and dance with someone.
So I don't know if they've tried to kind of get her up to dance with her. They have it's in the memory care unit. They do have like a TV, which I'll put like videos on and music on. So they put on, and I have been there when they've had like Spanish music on too, because there are a couple of other people there too who are bilingual. And sometimes same thing, like she'll do it and won't really smile, kind of more flat effect. But then sometimes same thing, there still could be intermittent screaming. It's not like the minute it comes on, she stops, screaming.
So,
unfortunately, it hasn't been.
You were just putting an idea that I didn't think of, but it's reminding me of my autistic nieces and nephews who love headphones. And I was also just going to say, Alyssa, my wife's, I realized she just had a visit from her nieces from Canada, and they didn't stay with us. And in the end, it was a good thing, because with 2 people visiting, it's too much for my wife. It's overwhelming. She can handle 1 person visiting, but she can't handle 2. So I can understand how your patient might be in a situation where she can't handle being around all these people. It's just too much noise and emotion, commotion. It's just too much. It's too much sensory overload. And so maybe, I don't know, suggest that a family, is there a way to get headphones that then play her favorite salsa music or something like that? I've discovered that my wife loves Frank Sinatra, and so she will sing along to Frank Sinatra if I play it for her. She sometimes will even dance.
Oh, thanks, Jeffrey. So here's a curiosity. Alyssa, have you been at all successful with where she sits? Have you tried different spaces and places so that she doesn't see as much motion, she doesn't see as many people? And does it matter if you sit on her right, her left, if you sit close and you say quiet things, or if you sit to the front? Have you noticed anything about visual gaze?
Not really. I mean, she's right-handed. So a lot of times I'm more on that side. I was kind of thinking, my first thought was, the mild, like traumatic brain injury and concussion and the overstimulation. So, I do try to have her, sit facing, more of like the wall versus the people coming in and out. So it's less visually distracting. But same thing, it's hard when I'm at that unit, I would say like twice a week. So when I'm there, I see her only 1 time a week, unfortunately, but I do see like where she's sitting in different things. And sometimes it seems like she'll be screaming if she's sitting in the couch area with people. She'll be screaming if she's they have like a little kitchen area, and usually like one of the caregivers is Spanish speaking, is sometimes sitting right over there with her. Sometimes the caregiver is not always, actively engaging,
Right.
but same thing. There's still sometimes.
So when she's
screaming.
actively engaged with, it's better.
For sure.
Typically.
Mhm.
Yeah, okay.
Typically, yes. Yep.
So we know that she needs somebody, and we know that somebody has to pay attention to her. We know that when you're outdoors with her, she does much better than when she's indoors and it's overwhelming. So that speaks to the environmental feature of the sense of being overwhelmed and being a small bit in a large environment, like outdoors with a partner. Have you ever seen her breathe differently outside?
She definitely seems more relaxed. And that's why I try to bring her out there. And unfortunately, I'm sure of course, it's hard sometimes in memory care units with staff turnover. And then on top of that, sometimes they're short staffed.
So is there priority? Okay, so Jill, I'm going to let you say something and then I'm going to come back to it. So go for it.
Okay.
I was
Now this is something that Deepa, I saw you speak a few years back in Villa Rica, and this story has always stuck with me. Alyssa, any chance, do you kind of look like her?
I
Nesha?
have dark hair like her, but that's probably about it.
Okay.
Dark hair.
When I saw Deepa
I
speak,
kind of look at things. You know what? Actually, I'm glad you said that. Actually, I might kind of look like her daughter a little bit because I have dark hair and I'm sometimes tanner. That we're kind of like dark hair, tan, around the same height. So maybe I kind of remind her of her daughters. Actually, now that you say that.
Well, there happened to be a lady that stood up in the crowd, and her mother was French Canadian, and she started reverting back to French language as her dementia progressed, and she got to where she became very anxious and scared when she was around English-speaking people, because her history is she had been violated during wartime, and I always remember that story, and so that kind of made me kind of think about that. Maybe it's the people, and she's nervous, and there's too many people. And I always tell my caregivers, remember, we don't know people's history.
Mama, abula, abula.
Yeah, exactly.
Please, please, please. And how many words is she using now, Alyssa, in conversations?
She's not really conversing. I'll kind of I know like broken Spanish, and a lot of it's kind of really mumbled, and I'll have like one of the Spanish speaking carriers sometimes, and they'll say that even in Spanish, they can't really understand a lot when you're trying to give choices. Sometimes she will say, like, if I ask about music, she'll say "sí." Sometimes she will say like "sí" or "no."
Okay, so I'm concerned that you've had a new head injury with new cognitive loss, and the cognitive loss is in the language center. And so unfortunately, unless she feels safe, her amygdala is turning on and warning her that it's not safe. And so the reason we're getting the yelling, which is actually screeching, I think it's that high register of intense terror. It's a need scream. It's not I'm uncomfortable, I don't like this scream. It's a need to get out of this situation. I need relief. I need help right now, or I'm going to die scream. It's that level. And I think if they checked her cortisol level, it would be off the charts. Because I think.
Are you saying like her sympathetic nervous system is so ramped up like it would be with a concussion, where it's just like not set, her parasympathetic system is not really coming in, so she's in a constant state of that fright, flight, or fright, flight, or flight. Yeah. So she's constantly on edge almost, and that's how
she's constantly seeking, and the seeking is, I'm seeking somebody to save me. It's a save me mode. It's not even I'm uncomfortable, I need help. It's a save me mode. And the only time she feels safe is when she has a family member or somebody who is really paying close attention and keeping her safe. She feels entirely unsafe. So I'm curious, what happens when they go to move her? Does she have any panic reactions to being moved, transitioned from space to space or surface to surface? Or is she calm and comfortable?
She's fine when you move her like in the wheelchair. Like if I bring her outside, if I bring her to like the back of the memory care unit, that's fine. Staff said she's fine, like moving into bed.
Okay.
Shower, doesn't like the shower, but I think that was before too. And I think most people don't living with dementia don't. But
No.
yeah, moving it out, she's okay with. I will say I haven't seen her transfer as much from, surface to surface in that sense.
Okay, so
I'm curious.
go for it.
I would say I'm curious too, because I think you're definitely right, like with needing the one-to-one and all that. And I think there's like that fine line of, where she might need some more alone time or one-to-one time, and how you kind of get everybody on board, or how I talk to the family too. Because I think, I'm just thinking about some people living with brain injuries. They need brain breaks, and their brain break can't be in a high stimulation environment. Sometimes they need to be alone to recharge. So kind of explaining that to family too, because the families, wants her out all the time. They don't want her in the room.
I'm curious about this outdoor thing. And do they have an area that can be observed by camera? Can they have a camera alert on her so that she could be outdoors on her own? Has she shown evidence of trying to get up out of the chair at all?
No, I've never once seen her try. I've never once seen her try to get up. They don't even have a seatbelt on her because she won't, I don't think she physically can. I don't think she has the strength now to get up. Unfortunately, they do have like a locked courtyard. For some reason, there isn't any cameras out there. And it's in a weird position because it's when you're walking in from the memory care unit, the doors for it are right there. And then some people's rooms have a window to it, but it's, care staff can't really see from the main area. But you're right, if they put a camera, the family has cameras in the room, if they put a camera outside, that might be a great idea. In a way, she could kind of have some alone time safely, without being like
in
neglected.
a quiet space. Really and maybe have then a recording of some music that she does like. And so we may look at, did she ever have a faith active history?
I can ask the daughter who I'm in contact with, but I'm not sure.
Yeah, I mean, the other thing would be if she is Catholic, if she does have a faith history, could you do something with the rosary? Could you do something with a faith-based use of music and a rhythm and that sort of thing? If that was comforting to her historically, is that something you could try? Is looking at more her faith base and whether or not in Spanish that might offer her, that kind of comfort. Could that be a voice that could offer her comfort and a space and a place, of prayer, of music, because wondering if there's any solution there for her that would provide, and whether there's noise canceling headphones that she would be comfortable with to take away the audio that may be overwhelming her.
That's a good idea too. Because I thought of that too, like the headphones, if we put in some like Jeffrey was saying, like some salsa music or even some calming sounds, if that would be helpful for when if she's in the dining room area with everybody, so she can be there but not have all the loud, because I just think about the concussions, the bright lights, the light sensitivity, the noise sensitivity, and she can't express that now.
And all
she's
the
having
movement
that.
stuff.
Yeah.
A lot of visual stuff. And the last one I would add is Cheryl asked about a weighted blanket, and it's sort of a heavier sort of support of that. And I sometimes will think about a weighted shawl. So it goes over the shoulders and sort of is like a comforting hug kind of thing for some folks, not for everybody, but it's something to consider as a possibility, because you can't give her more people that are her people, and it has to be her people, it sounds like.
Would you be, when I asked the family about like ordering her like the shawl or the weighted down blanket, does it just provide that comfort and security in a sense, and the stress, I'm guessing, and tension?
Yeah, it's the deep pressure, and it can give folks a real grounding feel. So you feel less floaty and less out of control, and it gives you that sense of being comforted. So some people find it organizing It's called
Oh,
an
okay, cool.
additional organizer, a sensory organizer.
It may
Jeffrey,
feel very heavy,
your
but
hand
it
is up.
doesn't feel
Is it up?
heavy on the
Or
body.
did you, yeah.
So the weighted blanket, Alyssa, is going to feel heavy, but on the body,
Okay.
it's not. Like when you're holding it,
Oh,
you'll be
okay,
like,
cool.
oh my God. But on
Yeah.
the body, it's not. And even my grandson with Tourette's disorder, he will not sleep in his bed without his. It's just so comforting on his body.
Okay, cool. Yeah, I've definitely heard of them before. I use them with kids with autism. And I've heard you guys mention them, but I didn't think of it. That's a great idea. And families more than willing to help. So I just want, nice to know kind of what it's the benefits.
Does she do anything with her mouth other than eating and screeching?
No, not really. I haven't seen her like try to like
And
put anything in her. Doesn't do like that or anything.
Motioning people to come over to her.
She's kind of like, no, she's more kind of like this almost like that's why I thought she was in pain, because I'll use like that nonverbal like pain AD scale, and her fists are kind of clenched sometimes. So sometimes it's like hard to kind of open it. So that's what was making, when I tried to give her the cup initially, it was making it hard. Like she was kind of like up here, but her mouth obviously is here. So I was having trouble with the hand in her hand. Yeah.
That's sort of that high intensity sensory distress state.
Okay.
I think that may be going back to some high sensory distress.
It also
Okay.
tells me some potentially deep brain questions about this, the location of the ischemic event. I mean, I'm not really one for having a lot of analysis and scans for people that are living with dementia, because that event itself can be so distressing. That being said, if this woman is 60, her body is going to chug on potentially for a long time, long beyond this. And I am curious about the link between post-stroke depression that comes on suddenly and is extreme crying, extreme expressions of distress. So I didn't know if we're talking about something that's more of a deep brain issue here, and that if an SSRI had been tried under the support, depending on where, but we're hearing more language stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, I can ask about that too. Sometimes she will have some little tears, but like you can just see that it was a little bit wet, like underneath. But I haven't personally seen her crying. The family has mentioned like that when when she was like younger and everything, she would always say like, "Don't ever let me get like that." So the family has always thought that like she's just so sad and like trying to not understanding it and is frustrated. And almost like family, it's like maybe she's almost more like locked in kind of, where they feel like she just can't express everything and is just so frustrated being like that. That's what they thought a lot of the screaming,
You're
was
not seeing
initially.
any tooth grinding. I mean, I have seen more when people are really frustrated.
No, she's kind of just more like very kind of, she's very kind of flat, like very, very flat. And, even when you try to feed her like something, just a very little, like, no, actually, I've never seen her really open her mouth. Like I don't know what she did before, but like, even if I'm giving her the spoon, it's like very small and just very petite amount. She will still drink out of a straw though. So she does still have some type of, strength that way. They've claimed, I should probably try. They said they'll go in and brush her teeth.
I would say
so,
you should try that.
So I actually wrote myself a note too, because I was like, I'm curious, because they're telling me that she doesn't really eat for them. So I'm curious if they're able to really get a toothbrush in her mouth. Right. But her oral care does seem pretty good. But I definitely be curious about.
Could be by history.
Accept that. And exactly. Yeah. I did write that down.
Jeff has a question.
Go ahead, Jeff.
Sorry, I just was going to add one little thing that depending on how enthusiastic your care workers might or might not be, I'm on my 6th day nurse, I think, right now, but I have a little language course, very basic, because obviously it's a person in her stage doesn't need a lot of language. But I teach the caregivers the words in English, and I'm wondering if you can just ask the caregivers in the unit to learn a few words of Spanish to calm her down, just to tell her. I literally say 3 things to my wife every time when she's safe, every time she's upset. I say, I understand your problem, so we try to address what she's worried about or validating. Listen, say she says she wants to go home or she wants to see, her mother. My wife calls for her mother sometimes. That's very distressing to me because I know she hardly ever does that. When she wants to go home, it's probably because the environment is just too much for her or something. But I always would just say, I'm sorry you want to go home. I'm sorry you don't feel comfortable, but can I tell you something? You are safe here. It's my job to keep you safe, to take care of you, and to try to keep you comfortable. And that generally calms her down. And I'm just wondering whether the staff could learn a few words of Spanish to say that to this lady every time they find her like that maybe that would help. I don't know. And I also just wanted to say, I'm sorry, I just want to say, I really I think applaud the family for trying to avoid medication, because I can tell you, I tried it, and I'm suffering the consequences. Antipsychotics do not work in the long run, and they have major negative consequences. So it's a good thing to avoid.
Yeah, and those are great points too. A lot of them, thankfully, 2 of the caregivers actually who are primarily Spanish speaking were there before she had the fall, and because of the language, they were always closer with her. So that tends to be the one that's kind of more buddied, I guess you could say buddied up with her and providing a lot of the care. But, unfortunately it is, I know they're trying to, they know they're getting a little bit like worn down.
The screeching, that sound is a very intense human sound that is meant to alert, alarm, and distress. I mean, that's what it's designed for. It is meant to get help immediately. And so that's why it exists. When babies do that, people come flying. That is that. And so it's sort of like a chair alarm that's been left on. And you've got a chair alarm, only it's a human being going off. And it signals something so inherently wrong for her that she is absolutely out of control, seeking relief. So the idea of trying to figure out how someone could give her some relief is really the vital part that you're playing.
Okay.
We've got to get her relief, because drugging her will not give her relief unless you drug her to where she's dysfunctional. And she's close to the edge now with her inability to care for herself in the way she cared for herself before the fall. I mean, so this sudden decline has been pretty precipitous in a very short time. She's lost incredible amounts of function. And is now, because it could be partial head injury, what we don't know is what's recoverable, because in addition to this, she has the ultimate of having a dementia that's progressive. But this phenomena could be part of that. But so Cheryl's saying any way we could get more volunteers in.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking too. I'm thinking maybe they don't really do, because it's an assisted living facility with a memory care unit. They don't really do like care plan meetings, but I'm wondering if maybe I can kind of bring one up and see if we can kind of do one with the directors too. And even if people can kind of maybe share the load a little bit, even if the directors are pretty hands-on, even if they can come back for a morning break and take her outside and sit with her for 15 minutes. Something like that. So it's kind of not falling on the one caregiver who speaks primarily Spanish with her, because I think it's a lot for her too. And she's a lot of times having to do the med part. So it's a lot of responsibility, and then maybe kind of getting family on a schedule too. I think they are trying to get, there's a high school really close by. So they're trying to get some high school volunteers. So maybe if we can get something, like that going, maybe that would be, helpful too, to kind of pair her with. That would be something.
Hopefully we've given you enough of
that was awesome. Thank you so much.
Absolutely. Cool. Thank you for
Really
bringing this
appreciate it. Thank
situation.
you.
Nice, Alyssa.
Thank you guys. Thank all of you.
We
Yeah,
welcome Beth Nolan.
yeah. The thing that, if you're listening out there, I think the thing that I get overwhelmed with, what's also happening for us here is we have a chat going, and all these questions are being recorded, and ideas that people are throwing out have been typed in. And a couple of us, because we're just curious and insane, we've got several tabs open on the internet at this point. And the things that Alyssa herself is tracking in this, really, this is hard. And so when we keep going back to the 6 pieces of the puzzle, I guess for me, and I'm curious for the rest of the world. So for me, if I had a situation where this was my responsibility, this is somebody that I am with, I would need to have a list of the things that we have figured out, that we think we know, the history that we've gathered before the stroke, after the stroke, what has worked, what hasn't worked, when has it worked. That going even beyond a care plan, within the context of the 6 pieces of the puzzle, I would need something outside of my own brain to track this. So if you are a care partner and you are overwhelmed and you keep saying the words every day, all the time, never, if I'm not able to get perspective on a situation, it tells me where my own brain is. So I'm curious, we keep bringing up the 6 pieces of the puzzle here. Has anybody been able to use that to help themselves get perspective when things become so overwhelming? Has anybody done this with folks, or be thinking, what have I figured out, what does and doesn't work? Anybody tried this before? Are we recording? Yeah, so Denise, you interact with a lot of different people too, don't you?
I do. And this is one of the things that I really like to use with people when, talking about these 6 pieces and, going through, this is what we can't change, but here's what we can. This is what we have control over, and getting a sense from the care partner and depending where the person is in the dementia process, getting a sense from them where they are feeling a need. So, to me, it's just been invaluable. And a lot of times it comes down to elements of all 3 of these pieces: the environment, the people, and that how we're using our time during the day. And is there some structure and predictability, not being rigid, because people get very wrapped around like it's like, no, this is not rigid. This is about on these days kind of where the expectation is, because it's so important for all of us to kind of have an idea what's coming next. But especially I think for somebody who is living with dementia, that there's a comfort in knowing, okay, now it's about time to have something to eat. It's time to go and listen to music, whatever it is that they're doing. It's time for just even looking out the window, and there's an array of bird feeders, and I'm looking to see if the hummingbirds are coming. Those are all things that I can't tell you how much I use this with all the people that I do the PAC training, but a lot more what I do is consultant. And this is just, to me, just a phenomenal thing that's so relatable, and people can sit back and go, okay, here, giving them the tools to be able to think about these things. This environment is not quite what we need it to be, especially when we're moving people into a new environment, and how challenging that change is going to be. We work with our hospital staff, and we're talking about 6 feet. Somebody going into the hospital, first of all, they're being seen for something acute. They're not being seen because of the dementia diagnosis. Think about what a hospital's like. It's not friendly. It's not familiar. It's not very forgiving. You can't make a lot of mistakes in there. So, and functional is kind of functional from the hospital's point of view, maybe not from that person living with dementia. So for me, this is just so helpful. And it's something that's very relatable as well. So
it looked like Alyssa has one more question, but then she disappeared. So I'm not sure. There she is.
Sorry, I was just raising my hand for the fact that I do love the puzzle. That was it.
Oh, good.
Thank you
Oh,
guys
yeah.
again for everything. I really, really
Oh, good.
appreciate it.
You are very welcome. I'm glad. So for me, Beth, you were talking about the 6 pieces of the puzzle. Recently, I have found often that I have to get things on one hand for me. And so often when I'm trying to help folks, I'll say, well, we could change place, we could change people, we could change props, what's out there, what kinds of things people can see, use, do something with. We could change program. What is it they're doing? What are they doing? Not are we doing to them, but what are they actively doing? And then finally, what are some possibilities we aren't even thinking about? And so I call it the 5 Ps, but sometimes I'm in a quick motion. I'm in a quick moment. I have a challenging situation. I'm going to start thinking of my 5 Ps. And then it's like, okay, so I've got to prepare. Which of these babies are we going to start looking at and messing with? And then I will initiate something. So I've got to prepare with all this stuff. And then I've got to initiate, and then I'm seeking participation. Then I'm going to evaluate how's it going. And it was really important in these situations, I think sometimes, let's really get a measure of how many screeches do we hear in an hour? Because here's our problem. This is true for many, many incredibly irritating things. We could drop, and there's evidence, we could drop it by 50% and people would not notice the difference. We could get it to go down by over 50% and people would still say she still screeches all the time. And it's like, wait, we dropped it by 50%. How could it be that she's still screeching all the time? Well, now I want it more. Now that I'm hearing it less, I want to hear less more. And so that desire for what I want, what I need her to be quiet. Well, we've cut it by 50%. But people simply are not able to take that in because that frequency is still over the limit for what they can tolerate. So we got to have some different people looking at this, or we got to keep working on something. But we want her to stop doing what she's doing, and we haven't offered much in substitution, which is why you'll hear us talk about this substitution pattern. If I'm going to do this, how is this going to change something for her? And it's just that frequency, it's the intensity, frequency, and volume that people will find gets to the very core of them. Yeah, Jeffrey.
I was just going to say, people are saying changing the people. It reminds me, I changed myself. I just, after lunch every day, it's been an hour to an hour and a half to get my wife to eat well. I want her to just sit and relax while I have a coffee and the nurse has her meal, and she will get up in 10 seconds. And so I change the person. I make the housekeeper come and take care of her because I cannot handle that at that point in time. So it just reminded me of that. That's all.
Well, I mean, that was first you did all this changing her place. You're going to get her to stay here. And it's like, no, you're not. Go somewhere else. Don't be there. Because what you find is you need to be in a different space, not worrying about it, because it just wears you out at that point. And at that moment, I'm just going to say that you don't like her very much because she can't give you what you need, which is a break. So you got to figure out how to get your break because she can't do it. Good work.
That's what I was going to say, is that on the people, we need to remember that this person, it's not the person who can't do it, or who's refusing to behave, or is refusing not to scream or whatever. They cannot. Their brain is so deteriorated and damaged that they cannot be different. And we have to accept that and figure out how we can change. Or, as I just said, remove ourselves because we can't handle it anymore.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think, for your wife, you made sure you had a substitution, though. It wasn't just remove Jeffrey. It's a substitution, not a subtraction.
Oh, I substitute her for the housekeeper who she loves very much.
There you go. There you go. Good decision. All right, Rachel, what you got?
Yeah, so this question is, How do you respond to a person who has Alzheimer's, who sincerely speaks gibberish and yet expects a response from you? So, do you have some ideas of how you might respond?
Okay, so let's review brain function here a little bit, because I think what we need to do is highlight this word called gibberish. Okay, so we have over in the left temporal lobe, okay, PAC people, go ahead and get your fingers out. Left temporal lobe, vocabulary, comprehension of speech, and speech production. Vocabulary, comprehension, and speech production. On the right, we have forbidden words and chit-chat phrases. We have turn taking and arguing. We have this third one, the rhythm of speech, including the rhythm of a question. And if it's not working for us, you will hear a change in frequency, intensity, or volume, or frequency, intensity, volume in the other direction. Then we have music, poetry, prayer, or counting. Music, poetry, prayer, or counting, comfort, and automatic rhythmic movements, automatic reactions, responses, like clapping and humming and those kinds of things. So what I hear the person saying is, get it, you're going to put it, get it down, you're going to go, get it. And at the very end of that, what did you hear? Gonna get it? I'm asking you a question. So why wouldn't I expect you to respond to me? I mean, I asked you a question. When you ask me a question, you expect me to answer you, and I'm living with a dementia. You want me to answer, well, what would you like for breakfast? And I go, get it, and you're gonna put it, get on, you're gonna get a go, down, you're gonna get it in. You're gonna put it in? So what I've kept, what am I keeping? What's the retained skill? Because it's important that she just talks gibberish. Well, yes and no. So what do we know?
Hearing she's got that rhythm.
She's got that nice
Still
rhythm.
Emotion too, that rhythm of speech.
She's still got some rhythm of speech. I sound like I should be saying something, and I am. What else do you notice?
She kind of has a social chit chat.
I have some social chit chat. I'm making eye contact when I do it too, I betcha. Because I want you to answer me. And I'm taking turns. But if you don't want to take turns, then I'll argue with you. Because evidently you want to argue rather than just chit chat, which I was just being nice. I was asking you stuff and you're not answering me. So Beth, see what you can do with it. Or do you want Rachel to do it? Or Cheryl, would you like to do it? You're going to get it down, you're going to put it on, you're going to go down, you're going to get it down. You going to do it?
You are?
Yeah, you do.
Yeah, we could.
Yeah, well, you put it together and you go down in and you hit it.
Well, we could.
Well, you baby, you need to get it hit me and you're going to get it and you go cat it, baby.
Well, that's true.
Yeah, you're true to baby, true to baby.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah, baby, you beat it and you're going to put it in. And you gotta put it in and you're gonna get it in. Gotta.
And you gotta go and go do it.
Yeah, you gotta get it.
You gotta get it? Let's go.
Well, come on.
Well, come on.
Yeah. All right. So, all right, what's going on here?
Hearing conversation between two people that are connecting.
I want to have a conversation. Unfortunately, when I go to find words to put into the spaces, there's no words. I don't have any of those words left. And when I go to do it, it's just, all I can do is make sounds. Now my sounds are repetitive kinds of iffy sort of sounds, but it's clear that I'm wanting to connect and communicate. And so you are going to need to figure out, oh yeah, you may want to think of more your sounds, and you want to look at your energy. So your energy is matching my energy. And when I want something, you're going to have to figure out how to do it. Now, it could be, I will tell you that when the phenomenological one, now you look here, you know the one that it is, that's the one I was saying about the whole thing. And that's when you will be, huh?
That one, the one that you were
Well,
mentioning.
yeah, but now shut up, because I got to tell you the issue is with it, all of it, and I'm gonna have a fraternity about it, and that's when you will find that is the it's the one that it is, and that's what you need to be thinking.
I do.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, because that will be an adversarial element.
Ah, okay.
Yeah, and when you are part of the hepasculate, then it will start to make everything be more reciculation.
Oh.
Now that is a very nice fluent sort of aphasia. How many of you in that second one found your brain much more challenged to tolerate me than the first one, which was sort of nonsensical? How much this one bothered your brain a little more?
Because some of the words made sense and you're like, wait a minute, they didn't go into a sentence. Yeah.
Typically this fluent aphasia, where I have the fluency but the words are not making sense, is much more irritating for people to be around in long term, because it makes your brain pay attention, but then you can't make sense of it. And it's sort of like somebody's erasing things as they're writing them. And it's frustrating for a human brain that thinks it knows how to interpret language. And so it becomes this really frustrating. And so I've had many more carers, family members and staff. I don't understand what you're saying, Mom. Slow down. Say it again. I need you to say it again. If you want me to help you, you have to make sense. I don't understand. What's funiculation? That doesn't make any sense. So what does that say about me in that book?
You need to slow down.
My primitive brain turned on, and I feel threatened by this inability to understand what somebody's saying. I actually feel intimidated by this language loss. And I am so frustrated that she thinks she makes sense. She doesn't make sense. And it's like, you're absolutely right. She does think she makes sense, but it's not purpose. I mean, I'm not doing it on purpose. Unfortunately, the kind of damage I have in my brain leaves me with all the lyrical quality, but my brain is just, oh, look, I found this one here. How about that one? Shove that one in there. What do you think about this one? And then every now and then I can't find one, and you'll hear me sort of struggle a little bit, but then my brain says, here, use this. And so I throw it in there, but I'm just as trapped by this as you are. And yet, it can really cause our relationship to be challenged when I do this. And because I like having conversations, I have a lot of them. And people find me irritating because you can't shut me up, because as soon as I make eye contact, I start conversations, and then people start avoiding my eye contact with me, and people try to get by me. And I say, oh, now wait, I wanted to tell you about the phenomenological one. Now, what are you? And then I get a little louder, and then I'm louder, and I'm doing this. And somebody is yelling, shut up, just tell her to shut up. Because I'm talking over the TV program, I'm talking over the lunch chatter. And so the reason I'm doing it is I think you aren't listening to me because it's too loud. So what am I going to do? Bring the volume up. And so I'm the person often, unlike people, everybody, like, can't you give her something? And it's like, what would you give me? I'm simply trying to talk. I mean, what is it you want to give me? Drugs. Which ones? Well, ones that make you not want to talk. What are those drugs? What shall I give you that will make you not want to talk?
Tranquilizer.
Drug me till I drop,
But-
I guess. Those are sort of, yeah.
No, I'm being kidding, but I'm just saying that, yeah. What do you do to calm them down though? Is it more just more
Well,
conversation?
I'm not actually uncalm. The problem is I don't know how to adjust my volume. And the reason the volume is coming up is the environment is too loud. And the reason the volume is too loud is because there's a lot of us in this space and people aren't making eye contact with me. If you make eye contact and get real close to me, I've got people to go really quiet because I'll say, oh, the funiculation. Now, tell me something. And as I lean in and I get quiet, guess who else leans in and gets quiet? Because they're actually copying me. But I've got to sound interested. Now, I don't have to get much of what they're saying, but I need to respond in a way. Oh, like you were seeing, like with Rachel. Huh. Now, Beth. So you can do the interjection. Oh, now, Beth.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so I got Beth to pause, and Beth will want to answer me. And I'll say, out this window,
You get it.
Are yeah, are you seeing anything out there that looks good?
And the looks in the Zen.
Come on, let's go take a look. Yeah, because what I want to do is switch the environment. And the environment has to be outward facing and away from people. And I'm actually engaging that. I'm saying, I want to come closer into your world. I don't want to try to avoid you. I am not tired of listening to you. I've got to get us something to look at, something to pay attention to, something for you to do. Because otherwise you're using the skill that you can, which is producing sounds. And if I don't want to hear a lot of those sounds, I've got to find other things for us to do together. Because otherwise you're trying to get my attention, just like the person, well, this one's different. I think the screeching person, I'm concerned there's something more intense happening. But for many people, if I'm just sort of trying to get somebody to talk to me, I'll talk to see if I can get somebody to talk. Apparently all it makes you want to do is not be with me. It's really not very friendly.
Well, there's people without dementia that are like that.
Yeah. Yeah. And I sort of don't go to the coffee shop, at certain times of the day because I didn't want to spend 2 hours sitting at a table with folks discussing petroleum products. So, I'm pretty sure I don't want to talk about sanitary products. I'm pretty sure I don't want to talk about that. So it's sort of this 50-50, like we need to find the right people to hang out with. Or get interest in petroleum products for sure window of time, which I've done.
Teepa, it reminds me, a lot of people find, I think, that where they can connect this to, because it is such a, you've described it so well and what we can do. And the reality is that we've practiced it quite a bit and finding other ways. This was a viral video that went viral a long time ago, quite a while ago, as my kid says, way back in like 2018 or something, like a couple years ago. But hearing this young father, I don't know if you guys can hear this. I don't know if I did a share sound, but you may
I remember seeing this. This is good.
Yeah, so and I put the link in the chat because it's a great one that shows the social chit chat of a prelingual child. And knowing what you know now, I would encourage you to take a look at it again because you can just Google dad talking with toddler on couch and it'll come up. But the cool thing about it, there's a moment where the child says something rhythmically and the dad answers something back. And the kid looks at him like, yeah, you didn't get it. And he gives him a little bit of grace and goes on and tries again to connect with his dad, who's, it's funny how even at that moment, this child who's prelingual, who's developing these skills, knows the rhythm, put something out there that dad gave the mismatch of the answer with. And it's so interesting to see that we can do this. We can do this with kids. It doesn't have to be perfect. We do get it all the time, but we can do this with children. Can we find the joy in doing it with somebody that is, well, maybe postlingual, but there is language and communication that's happening. So there's relationships that could happen. So it may be a great place to start. Can you do this with your grandbabies? Can you do this with the neighbor kids? If you can do that there, you might be able to try it with another adult and watching your tone to know how you would talk in a tone in response to an adult. Maybe an opportunity. We'd love to hear what you have to say.
So I saw somebody else, Rachel. Who else was it Jeffrey or somebody had their hand up?
Jeff has his hand up.
Okay, thanks.
I apologize, Deepa. I was just asking, is you're making me think of when you were saying, my wife can't have a conversation, and she speaks in what I describe as something between a mumble and a whimper. It's so bad that with my horrible hearing, I cannot tell whether she says yes or no. I'm asking her a yes or no question. I cannot tell whether she's answering yes or no. And I get, like you expressed there, I get so frustrated. I cannot help you unless you tell me yes or no. You have to enunciate, you have to speak clearly. And I guess I'm just wondering, how can I control that? Because it's so hard for me, it's so frustrating. And I know it's not her fault, but it's just so hard that for me, I'm trying to help her and I can't.
Yeah, so you're reminding me, Jeffrey, you're making me think, are you using a strong visual cue? Yes or no?
I bet you he is cheaper when he's
I wouldn't know.
I
Probably.
need yes or
Sure.
no.
Yeah.
So, when she's trying to tell you something, yeah, no. Will she copy you at all?
Actually, I suppose I haven't done that yet, is saying yes or no. I need to try that more. Yeah, okay.
Yeah, and pause between and make sure you're like, yeah, no.
No,
Yeah,
because I know her. I know her brain is in that stage where she needs at least 6 seconds to be able to process anything. But fine. I think I said I need to practice yes or no.
Yeah,
okay.
Because you're a talker, and it's hard to switch from talking to actually physically going through something like this. I mean, it is a challenge. I mean, it's hard. This stuff is hard stuff. Absolutely.
It's very hard not to be able to have a conversation with my wife. I agree.
Yeah. Yeah, it definitely is. All right. We are getting very close to time. We have nothing but basically 2 minutes left. Rachel, you don't have any super fast questions, do you?
Actually, there was one. It had to do with Namunda and those sorts of things. At what point is Namunda or Aricept no longer effective?
Well, for some people, never. It was never effective. It wasn't ever helpful. So, it never made a difference. About a third of people who have a dementia will not find any benefit in either the acetylcholinesterase inhibitors or the glutamate moderators. Quite honestly, 1/3 of people don't get anything out of them. Another group of people, there is a window of time for them. Most of the testing has been done in approximately 36 weeks to 48 weeks. So what does that amount to? How many weeks, how many years is that? 52 is a year. So basically, most of the testing that has been done in these meds, I mean, you only have to test something for a period of time. So everything else is fairly anecdotal, following people over time. How much did people benefit? How long does it stay active? Typically, we don't have a lot of good data on that because there's no requirement to do that kind of work. This was the only drugs in town. I mean, if you don't use these, you don't have anything to use. And so people were staying on them. And, there is probably about a third of people that are still possibly benefiting some. But we have to ask the question, the cost versus the benefit, the negatives versus the positives, and start really looking hard at what's it giving us versus what's it costing us. And I don't just mean financially what it's costing us. Is it impacting bowel or bladder function? Is it impacting anxiety? Is it impacting the gut and how it's irritated and nausea, or is it impacting just my distress state a lot? And is it not really helping? And could it be causing some other challenges in another part of my life? And should we look at it and say, you know what, let's back off of it and see what happens? Because most of these meds, again, were never necessarily tested with non-Alzheimer's. Some of them have been, many of them have not. FTD is one that shouldn't typically be used for frontal the acetylcholinesterase inhibitors, unless there's for some reason that you have evidence that they are low on acetylcholine, is not classically recommended at all for FTDs, because people with FTD are not missing their acetylcholine. They have other issues going on. So it's the kind of thing you go, Cheryl Ann?
Real quick, we're about 7 years into the vascular dementia journey with my mom. Through a hospital stay, we met a new neurologist who wanted to try Aricept on my mom.
Mm-hmm.
And he said, don't you think she deserves this chance? And I was like, well, maybe. So we started it. 4 weeks in, heightened distress, some screaming. And so I sat with her one day, just trying to figure out what was going on, because I said, I don't necessarily know I want her to remember. Like, what is this going to do? And she said, I don't know who did this to me. She was so distressed. She said, look at the scars on my body. I'm trapped here with all these old people. Nobody will ever marry me. And like, I was like, what are you talking about? She said, I'm 43 years old and trapped in this body in this building. Nobody would marry me. And so it had caused her memory to bring her back to being 43 years old. And how distressing could that be in this memory care unit?
Oh my heavens. Oh,
and
wow.
So I was like, hey, we're going to have to take my mom off this.
This is not working for us. This being 43 in an 85-year-old's body is not a good deal.
In a memory care unit.
Bummer. Ouch.
Yeah.
Boy, Cheryl Ann, that is quite a story, because that is unfortunately the kind of thing. It might give me some alertness, and maybe that's not a good thing.
And then that's the other benefit of being curious and listening.
Mm-hmm. You were actually listening to what she said and understanding it made sense. She was not talking crazy talk. This was actually her brain trying to figure out what was going on with her. And she was seeing herself with new eyes.
Yep.
Ouch. Ooh, good eyes, good listening. Glad you were there.
Glad you were there to teach me that.
Yeah. Well, everybody, we want to say thanks. Matthew, anything from the YouTube world you want to bring back to the table?
Lots of activity in the chat, and I got a chance to do some polls, Teepa, tonight. And one big thing that stood out was that people really enjoyed when you were bringing out the brain parts, going over the different brain parts and connecting it to what we were talking about. So looking forward to, in the future, getting an opportunity to learn more about other parts of the brain and how it's connecting to what we're talking about was definitely something that people really enjoyed.
Great. Thank you, Matthew. Thanks for that feedback. And thanks for you out there keeping track with us. Thank you, everybody from the Zoom room. Thank you for giving up some time and being present. We really appreciate you. All right, everybody, take care with your care, and we will see you again next month if we don't see you before. Take care, all.
Bye, everybody.